Moses meets the Messiah in heaven. Moses received still another distinction on the day of his death, for on that day God permitted him to ascend to the lofty place of heaven and showed him the reward that awaited him. The divine attribute of mercy appeared before him and said to him, "I bring glad tidings to you, at which you will rejoice. Turn to the throne of mercy and behold." Moses turned and saw God build a temple of jewels and pearls, while between the separate gems and pearls shimmered the radiance of the Shekinah, brighter than all the jewels. And in this temple he beheld the Messiah and his own brother, Aaron, standing erect and dressed in the robe of the high priest. Aaron then said to Moses, "Do not draw near, for this is the place where the Shekinah dwells, and no one may enter before he has tasted death, and his soul has been delivered by the angel of death." Moses now fell on his face before God, saying, "Permit me to speak to your Messiah before I die." God then said to Moses, "Come, I will teach you my great name, that the flames of the Shekinah will not consume you." When the Messiah and Aaron beheld Moses approach them, they knew that God had taught him the great name, so they went to meet him and saluted him with a greeting. "Blessed be he that comes in the name of the Lord." Moses then said to the Messiah, "God told me that Israel was to erect a temple, and now I see him build his own temple, but in heaven." The Messiah replied, "Your ancestor Jacob saw the temple that will be erected on earth, and also the temple that God builds with his own hand in heaven, and he clearly understood that it was the temple God constructed with his own hand in heaven that was to be preserved for Israel to all eternity. This was the night when Jacob slept on a stone, and in his dream beheld one Jerusalem on earth and another in heaven. God then said to Jacob, 'My son, today I stand above you, as in the future your children will stand before me.' At the sight of these two Jerusalems, the earthly and the heavenly, Jacob said, 'The Jerusalem on earth is nothing. This is not the house that will be preserved for my children in all generations, but in truth that other house of God that he builds with his own hands.' But if you say," continued the Messiah, "that God with his own hands builds himself a temple in heaven, know then that with his own hands also he will build the temple on earth." When Moses heard these words from the mouth of the Messiah, he rejoiced greatly, and lifting up his face to God, he said, "O Lord of the world, when will this temple built here in heaven come down to earth?" God replied, "I have made known the time of the event to no creature, either to the earlier ones or the latter. How then should I tell you?" Moses said, "Well, give me a sign, so out of the happenings in the world I can deduce when that time approaches." God, "I will first scatter Israel as with a shovel all over the world, so that they may be scattered among all nations to the four corners of the earth, and then I will gather them in, those that migrated with Jonah, the son of Amittai, to the land of Pathros, and those that dwell in the lands of Shinar, Hamath, Elam, and the islands of the sea, and the whole world." When Moses heard this, he departed from heaven with a joyous spirit. The angel of death followed him to earth, but he could not possess himself of Moses' soul, for he refused to give it to him, delivering it to none but God himself. The last hours of Moses. When Moses had finished looking on the land and the future, he was 1 hour nearer to death. A voice sounded from heaven and said, "Make no fruitless endeavors to live." Moses, however, did not desist from prayer, saying to God, "Lord of the world, let me stay on this side of the Jordan with the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad, that I may be as one of them, while Joshua, as king at the head of Israel, will enter into the land." God replied, "Do you wish me to render as nothing the words in the Torah that read, 3 times in the year all your males will appear before the Lord"? If Israel sees that you do not make a pilgrimage to the sanctuary, the people will say, if Moses, through whom the Torah and the laws were given to us, does not make the pilgrimage to the sanctuary, how much more do we need to do so? You would then cause non-observance of my commandments. I have furthermore written in the Torah through you, at the end of every 7 years, in the time of the year of release, Joshua will read this law before all Israel. If you were to live, you would put Joshua's authority in the eyes of Israel to nothing, for they would say, instead of learning the Torah and hearing it from the disciple, let us rather go to the teacher and learn from him. Israel would then abandon Joshua and go to you, so that you would cause rebellion against my Torah, in which is written that the king will read it before all Israel, in the set time of the year of release. In the meanwhile, still another hour had passed, and a voice sounded from heaven and said, how long will you endeavor in vain to avert the sentence? You have only 2 hours more of life. The wicked Samael, head of evil spirits, had eagerly awaited the moment of Moses' death, for he hoped to take his soul like that of all other mortals, and he said continually, when will the moment be at hand when Michael will weep and I will triumph? When now 2 hours remained before Moses' death, Michael, Israel's guardian angel, began to weep, and Samael was jubilant, for now the moment he had waited for so long was very close. But Michael said to Samael, do not rejoice against me, you scoundrel. When I fall, I will rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. Even if I fell on account of Moses' death, I will rise again through Joshua, when he will conquer the 31 kings of Palestine. Even if I sit in darkness, owing to the destruction of the first and second temples, the Lord will be my light on the day of the Messiah. In the meantime, still another hour had passed, and a voice resounded from heaven and said, Moses, you have only 1 hour more of life. Moses then said, O Lord of the world, even if you will not let me enter into the land of Israel, leave me at least in this world, that I may live and not die. God replied, If I should not let you die in this world, how then can I revive you in the future world? You would, moreover, then give lie to the Torah, for through you I wrote, Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. Moses continued to pray, O Lord of the world, if you do not permit me to enter into the land of Israel, let me live like the beasts of the field, and feed on herbs and drink water. Let me live and see the world. Let me be as one of these. But God said, Enough! Still Moses continued, If you would not grant me this, let me at least live in this world like a bird that flies in the 4 directions of the world, and each day gathers its food from the ground, drinks water out of the stream, and in evening returns to his nest. But even this last prayer was denied, for God said, You have already spoken way too much. Moses now raised his voice in weeping and said, To who can I go that will implore mercy for me? He went to every work of creation and said, Implore mercy for me. But all replied, We cannot even implore mercy for ourselves, for God has made everything beautiful in its time. But afterward, all go into one place. All are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. For the heaven will vanish like smoke, and the earth will wax old like a garment. When Moses saw that no one could aid him, he said, He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment. A God of faithfulness and without iniquity. Just and right is he. He then called Joshua, and in the presence of all Israel addressed him as follows, Behold, my son, the people I deliver into your hands are the people of the Lord. It is still in its youth, and so is inexperienced in the observance of the commandments. Beware therefore, lest you speak harshly to them, for they are the children of the Holy One, who called them my firstborn son, Israel, and he loved them before all other nations. But God, on the other hand, at once said to Joshua, Joshua, your teacher Moses has transferred his office to you. Follow now in his footsteps. Take a rod and hit them on the head. Israel is a child, so I love him, and withhold not the correction from the child. Joshua now said to Moses, O my teacher Moses, what will become of me? If I give the one a share on the mountain, he will be sure to want one in the valley, and he to whom I give his share in the valley will wish it to be on the mountain. Moses, however, quieted him, saying, Be not afraid, for God has assured me that there will be peace at the distribution of the land. Then Moses said, Question me regarding the laws that are not quite clear to you, for I will be taken from you, and you will see me no more. Joshua replied, When, O my master, have I ever left you, by day or by night, that I should be in doubt concerning anything you have taught me? Moses said, Even if you have no questions to ask, come that I may kiss you. Joshua went to Moses, who kissed him and wept on his neck, and a second time blessed him, saying, May you be at peace, and Israel be at peace with you. The blessing of Moses. The people now came to Moses and said, The hour of your death is at hand. And he replied, Wait until I have blessed you. All my life you have had no pleasant experience from me, for I constantly rebuked you and admonished you to fear the Lord, and fulfill the commandments. Therefore I do not wish to depart before I have blessed you. Moses had indeed always cherished the desire of blessing Israel, but the angel of death had never permitted him to satisfy his wish. So shortly before dying, he enchained the angel of death, cast him beneath his feet, and blessed Israel in spite of their enemy, saying, Help your people, and bless your inheritance. Feed them, and bear them up forever. Moses was not the first to bestow blessings, as former generations had done so also, but no blessing was as effective as his. Noah blessed his sons, but it was a divided blessing, being intended for Shem, whereas Ham, instead of being blessed, was cursed. Isaac blessed his sons, but his blessing led to a dispute, for Esau envied Jacob. Jacob blessed his sons, but even his blessing was not without a blemish, for in blessing he rebuked Reuben and called him to account for his sins. Even the number of Moses' blessings excelled that of his predecessors, for when God created the world, he blessed Adam and Eve, and this blessing remained on the world until the flood, when it ceased. When Noah left the ark, God appeared before him and bestowed on him anew the blessing that had vanished during the flood. And this blessing rested on the world until Abraham came into the world and received a second blessing from God, who said, And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless them that bless you, and curse them that curse you. God then said to Abraham, Henceforth it no longer behooves me to bless my creatures in person, but I will leave the blessings to you. Who you bless will be blessed by me. Abraham did not, however, bless his own son Isaac, in order that the villain Esau might not have a share in the blessing. Jacob, however, received not only 2 blessings from his father, but one other besides from the angel whom he wrestled, and one from God. And the blessing that had been Abraham's to bestow on his house went to Jacob. When Jacob blessed his sons, he passed on to them the 5 blessings he had received, and added one more. Balaam should really have blessed Israel with 7 benedictions, corresponding to the 7 altars he had erected, but he envied Israel greatly and blessed them with only 3 blessings. God then said, You villain, that begrudge Israel their blessings. I will not permit you to bestow on Israel all the blessings that are their due. Moses, who has a benevolent eye, will bless Israel. And so it came to pass. Moses added a 7th blessing to the 6 benedictions with which Jacob had blessed his 12 sons. This was not, however, the first time that Moses blessed the people. He blessed them at the erection of the tabernacle, then at its consecration, a third time at the installation of the judges, and a fourth time on the day of his death. Before bestowing his blessing on Israel, however, Moses intoned a song in God's praise, for it is fitting to glorify God's name before asking a favor of him. And as Moses was about to ask God to bless Israel, he first proclaimed his grandeur and his majesty. He said, "When God first revealed himself to Israel to bestow the Torah on them, he appeared to them not from one direction, but from all four at once. He came from Sinai, which is in the south, and rose from Seir in the east. He shines forth from Mount Paran in the north, and he came from the 10,000 holy angels that dwell in the west." He proclaimed the Torah not only in the language of Sinai, that is Hebrew, but also in the tongue of Seir, that is Roman, as well as in Paran speech, that is Arabic, and in the speech of Kadesh, that is Aramaic. For he offered the Torah not to Israel alone, but to all the nations on earth. These, however, did not want to accept it, hence his wrath against them, and his special love for Israel, who, despite their awed fear and trembling at God's appearance on Sinai, still accepted the Torah. Then Moses got to the point. "Lord of the world, when Israel has been driven out of their land, be mindful of the merits of the patriarchs, and stand by them. Deliver them in your mercy from the yoke of the nations, and from death, and guide them in the future world as you led them in the desert." At these words Israel exclaimed, "The Torah that Moses brought to us at the risk of his life is our bride, and no other nation may lay claim to it. Moses was our king when the 70 elders assembled, and in the future the Messiah will be our king, surrounded by 7 shepherds, and he will gather together once more the scattered tribes of Israel." Then Moses said, "God first appeared in Egypt to deliver his people, then at Sinai to give them the Torah, and he will appear a third time to take vengeance on Edom, and will finally appear to destroy Gog." After Moses had praised and glorified God, he began to implore his blessings for the tribes. His first prayer concerned Reuben, for whom he implored forgiveness for his sin with Bilhah. He said, "May Reuben come to life again in the future world for his good deed in saving Joseph, and may he not forever remain dead on account of his sin with Bilhah. May Reuben's descendants also be heroes in war, and heroes in their knowledge of the Torah." God granted this prayer and forgave Reuben's sin in accordance with the wish of the other tribes, who begged God to grant forgiveness for their eldest brother. Moses at once perceived that God had granted his prayer, for all the 12 stones in the high priest's breastplate began to gleam, whereas formerly Reuben's stone had given no light. When Moses saw that God had forgiven Reuben's sin, he at once set about trying to obtain God's pardon for Judah, saying, "Was it not Judah that through his penitent confession of his sin with his daughter-in-law Tamar induced Reuben too to seek atonement and repentance?" The sin for which Moses asked God to forgive Judah was that he had never redeemed his promise to bring Benjamin back to his father. Owing to this sin, his corpse fell to pieces, so that its bones rolled about in their coffin during the 40 years' march in the desert. But as soon as Moses prayed to God, saying, "Hear, Lord, the voice of Judah," the bones joined together once more. But his sin was not quite forgiven, for he was not yet admitted to the heavenly academy. Therefore Moses continued to pray, "Bring him to his people." And he was admitted. It did not indeed, however, benefit him, for in punishment for his sin, God brought it to pass that he could not follow the discussion of the scholars in heaven, much less take part in them. Then Moses prayed, "Let his hands be sufficient for him." And then he no longer sat as one speechless in the heavenly academy. But still his sin was not quite forgiven, for Judah could not succeed in being victorious in the disputes of the learned. Hence Moses prayed, "And be a help against his adversaries." It was only then that Judah's sin was fully forgiven, and he succeeded in his disputes in the heavenly academy. As Moses prayed for Judah, so too did he pray for his seed, and especially for David and the royal dynasty of David. He said, "When David, king of Israel, will be in need and pray to you, hear, Lord, his voice, and be a help against his adversaries. Bring him back then to his people in peace, and when alone he sets out to battle Goliath, let his hands be sufficient for him, and be a help against his adversary." Moses at the same time prayed, asking God to stand by the tribe of Judah, whose chief weapon in war was the bow, that their hands might be sufficient, that they might vigorously, and with good aim, speed the arrow. As Moses had never forgiven Simon their sin with the daughters of Moab, he bestowed on them no blessing. But this tribe was also not quite forgotten, for he included this tribe in his blessing for Judah, praying to God that he might hear Judah's voice whenever Judah should pray for the tribe of Simon, when they might be in distress, and that furthermore he give them their possession in the Holy Land beside Judah's. Simon and Levi drank out of the same cup, for both together in their wrath slew the inhabitants of Shechem. But whereas Levi made amends for this sin, Simon added a new one. It was the Levites who in their zeal for God slew those that had worshipped the golden calf. It was a Levite, Phinehas, moreover, who in his zeal for God slew the wicked prince of the tribe of Simon, and his mistress. Hence Moses praised and blessed the tribe of Levi, where he did not even consider Simon with a word. In his words referring to Aaron, prince of the tribe of Levi, he said, "May your Urim and Thummim belong to Aaron, who ministered services of love to your children, who stood every test that you put on him, and who, at the waters of rebellion, became the victim of a wrong accusation." God had then decreed against Aaron that he was to die in the desert, although not he but Moses had trespassed against him, saying to Israel, "Hear now, you rebels." As Aaron, prince of the tribe of Levi, when Israel was still in Egypt, exclaimed passionately against the people because they worshipped idols, so too all the tribe of Levi stood up by God's standard when Israel worshipped the golden calf, and slew the idolaters, even if they were their half-brothers or their daughters' sons. The Levites also were the only ones who in Egypt, as in the desert, remained true to God and his teachings, did not abandon the token of the covenant, and were not tempted to rebellion by the spies. Hence, continued Moses, the Levites will be the only ones who will give judgment and instruction to Israel, who will put incense in the Holy of Holies and whole burnt offerings on his altar. Their sacrifices will reconcile Israel with God, and they themselves will be blessed with earthly goods. You, Lord, smite the loins of those that rise up against them to dispute the priestly rights of this tribe. You destroyed Korah, and they that hate Israel, like King Uzziah, will not rise again. Bless, Lord, the substance of the Levites, who give from the tithes they receive 1/10 to the priests. May you accept sacrifice from the hands of the priest Elijah on Mount Carmel. Smite the loins of his enemy Ahab, break the neck of the latter's false prophets, and may the enemies of the high priest Johanan never rise again. Benjamin, said Moses, is the beloved of the Lord, who he will always shield, and whose possession of the sanctuary will stand in this world as well as in the time of the Messiah, and in the future world. Moses then blessed Joseph's tribe with the blessing that their possession might be the most fruitful and blessed land on earth. Dew will ever be there, and many wells. It will constantly be exposed to the gentle influences of sun and moon, that the fruits may ripen early. I wish him, said Moses, that the blessings given him by the patriarchs and the wives of the patriarchs may be fulfilled. And so too it came to pass, for the land of the tribe of Joseph possessed everything, and nothing within it was lacking. This was the reward to Joseph for having fulfilled the word of God that was revealed to Moses in the bush of thorns, and also because as king of Egypt he treated his brothers with high honors, although they had thrust him from their midst. Moses furthermore blessed Joseph by promising him that as he had been the first of Jacob's sons to come to Egypt, he was also to be the first in the future world to appear in the Holy Land. Moses proclaimed the heroism of Joseph's seed in the words, "As it is in vain to try to force the firstborn bull to labor, so little will Joseph's sons be yoked into service by the empires. As the unicorn, with his horns, pushes away all other animals, so too will Joseph's sons rule the nations, even to the ends of the earth. The Ephraimite Joshua will destroy myriads of heathens, and the Manassite Gideon thousands of them." Zebulun was the tribe that before all other tribes devoted itself to commerce, in this way acting as the agent between Israel and the other nations, selling the products of Palestine to the latter and the foreign wares to the former. Hence the blessing that Moses bestowed on them. "Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out on commercial enterprises. At your recommendation, many nations will pray on the sacred mountain of the temple and offer sacrifices." For the people that came into Zebulun's realm on matters of business used to go then to Jerusalem to look on the sanctuary of the Jews, and many of them were converted through the grand impression that the life in the holy city made on them. Moses furthermore blessed this tribe by giving them an estate by the sea, which might yield them costly fish and purple shell, and the sand might furnish them the material for glass. The other tribes were therefore dependent on Zebulun for these articles, which they could not obtain from anyone else, for whoever attempted to rob Zebulun was doomed to bad luck in business. It is the Sea of Chifa, also within Zebulun's territory, where all the treasures of the ocean were brought to shore. For whenever a ship is wrecked at sea, the ocean sends it and its treasures to the Sea of Chifa, where it is hoarded for the pious until the judgment day. One other blessing of Zebulun was that it would always be victorious in battle, whereas the tribe of Issachar, closely bound up with it, was blessed by its distinction in the tents of learning. For Issachar was the tribe of scholars and judges. So Moses blessed them, saying that in the future time Israel's great house of instruction, as well as the great Sanhedrin, would be located in this tribe. The tribe of Gad, dwelling on the boundary of the land of Israel, received the benediction that in future time it would be as strong in battle as it had been at the first conquest of Palestine, and would hereafter stand at the head of Israel on their return to the Holy Land, as it had done on the first entrance. Moses praised this tribe for choosing its site on this side of the Jordan, because that place had been chosen to hold Moses' tomb. Moses did die on Mount Nebo, which is Reuben's possession, but his body was taken from Nebo by wings of the Shekinah and brought to Gad's territory, a distance of 4 miles, amid the lamentations of the angels who said, "He will now enter into peace and rest in his bed." Dan, who like Gad had his territory on the boundary of the land, was also blessed with strength and might, so that he might ward off attacks of Israel's enemies. He was also blessed in receiving his territory in the Holy Land in 2 different sections. Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of blessings of the Lord, you possess the west and the south. This blessing was true, for the tribe of Naphtali had possession of an abundance of fish and mushrooms, so that they could maintain themselves without much labor in the valley of Gennesaret. Furthermore, their possession bore fruits that were renowned for their extraordinary sweetness. But Naphtali was blessed not with material blessings only, but also with spiritual, for it was the great house of instruction at Tiberias to which Moses alluded when he said of Naphtali, "He is full with the blessings of the Lord." Moses called Asher the favorite of his brethren, for it was this tribe that in the years of fallow provided nourishment for all Israel, as its soil was so productive that what grew of its own accord was enough for all. But Moses blessed Asher in particular with a land rich in olives, so that oil flowed in streams through Asher's land. Hence Moses blessed him with the words, "The treasures of all lands will flow to you, for the nations will give you gold and silver for your oil." He blessed Asher moreover with many sons, and with daughters that preserved the charms of youth in their old age. As Moses uttered 11 benedictions, so likewise did he compose 11 psalms, corresponding to the 11 tribes blessed by him. These psalms of Moses were later received into David's Psalter, where the psalms of Adam, Melchizedek, Abraham, Solomon, Asaph, and the 3 sons of Korah also found their place. Moses' first psalm says, "You turn men away from destruction, and say, 'Return, you children of men.'" Another one of Moses' psalms reads, "He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty," which corresponds to the tribe of Levi that dwelled in the sanctuary, the shadow of the Almighty. To the tribe of Judah, whose name signifies "Praise the Lord," begins the psalm, "It is a good thing to give thanks to the Lord." The psalm, "The Lord is clothed with majesty," is Benjamin's, for the sanctuary stood in his possession. Hence his psalm closes with the words, "Holiness becomes your house, O Lord, forevermore." "O Lord, to whom vengeance belongs, shine forth," was composed by Moses for the tribe of Gad. For Elijah, a member of this tribe, was to destroy the foundations of the heathens, and to wreak on them the vengeance of the Lord. To the tribe of learned men, Issachar, goes the psalm, "O come, let us sing to the Lord, let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation." For it is this tribe that occupies themselves with the Torah, the book of praise. Next, Moses prays for death. End part 72 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.